Hi, this is Regina Y. Favors with Favors Financial Recovery. So the series topic is goal orientation and overcoming financial setback. So I use the concept of goal orientation theory to explore the two different types of goal orientations, which are learning goal orientation and performance goal orientation. And you will undoubtedly realize or discover that through many of my audio lessons, I tend to use this academic concept and apply it to relationship making, relationship decision making, understanding relationship failure, um, determining readiness for relationships, etc. Well, I now want to apply goal orientation to personal finances and helping you to understand that we should adopt a mastery orientation for personal finance. That we do not just assume that whatever we learn in that moment about debt and income, expenses, etc., that's all we need to know. That personal adopting a mastery orientation towards personal finance means that you are adopting that type of goal or strategy for long term. For the rest of your life, you need to be concerned about personal finances, how to manage your personal finances, how to set boundaries around your personal finances. And it's not just something you learn in your 20s or your 30s or your 40s, that it is something that I believe that should be taught as early as middle school, if not middle school, high school at least. And then throughout the rest of our years, we are learning about personal finance, and it's an ongoing thing. And so that's what I want to talk about. So this is Favors Financial Recovery, series topic, goal orientation, and overcoming financial setback. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell if you are interested in further videos. Thank you for visiting the channel. This lecture is subject to fair use. So here are your learning objectives. By the end of this lecture, students will be able to do the following: define the difference between two types of goal orientations, reflect on your performance goal orientation, apply either goal orientation type to your current financial setback, design a plan that considers one or more goal orientation types in your financial recovery. So, of course, you need to understand the differences between goal orientation, specifically understand the typical academic context or academic application of the concept, but also consider how it might apply within your personal life and specifically to personal finances. So then I would have you to think about reflecting on performance goal orientation, because it is the concept where we tend to want to look smart in every situation, but not actually learn anything. And so it reflects also a fixed mindset, which I also discuss in various audios. So then you want to then apply one or both goal orientation types to your current financial setback. So how are you looking smart? How are you looking good but don't have any money in the bank? You have tons of clothes on. You got new hair, you got new nails, you got new everything, new cars. But if something happened to you and you had a situation with your apartment or something like that, could you move into a motel? If you lost your job, do you have enough savings to try to find another job for like 6 months? So that's what I want you to think about in terms of applying one or more goal orientation types to your current financial setback. And then, of course, you are designing a plan that considers one or more goal orientation types in your financial recovery, which is the goal. Mission statement. The mission of Favors Financial Recovery is to offer psychology concepts and approaches to educate and encourage individuals to overcome financial setbacks. So I thought using psychology to understand our behavior when we are trying to manage our personal finances, I think, is a very important strategy because a lot of times we don't always know why we do what we do with personal finances. Sometimes it has a lot to do with the upbringing that we've had, the family dynamic, family context, right? And then sometimes it could also be that we don't always listen to someone who is telling us the right thing to do. So with psychology being sort of a discipline to study behavior, I think it would be interesting to see or to apply psychology to personal finance. So that's why the mission is centered on using psychology concepts, strategies, approaches, etc., to educate and encourage individuals to overcome financial setback. All right, so here are the core values. Core values are personal responsibility, growth mindset, mastery orientation, ethical dealings, integrity, and recovery. So personal responsibility, I think about it in terms of you being 100% responsible for yourself as an adult to carry out your life. Whatever you didn't learn when you were young, and sure, it always has some kind of impact upon you as an adult, especially as an early adult. You're just going to have to work it out in your heart and your mind, because now you are responsible for yourself as an adult. And so that means you have to take full responsibility for your finances when you don't do what you need to do. You can't say to yourself, just because I had to move in with my family, they need to understand. No one needs to understand anything. No one is responsible for you but you. And so if you can understand that as one of your own personal core values, then you will understand that you need to make sure you cover yourself before you cover anybody else. You don't give away your rent just because you have extra money in the bank. Your rent could be $900 and you have an extra $900 in the bank. That's not extra money. That's just next month's rent. And when someone comes along and says, well, I need $200 I need $200, and you say, okay, well, I got it because I got $900 in the bank. What happens if you lose your job the next month? So personal responsibility is just really understanding that you are 100% responsible for you, and that you need to do all that you can to ensure that you have economic stability, financial stability, you continue to plan, prepare, etc. Growth mindset is specific to mindset that Carol Dweck discusses in her book, Mindset, The New Psychology of Success, where she is making a distinction between fixed mindset and growth mindset. With fixed mindset, you don't necessarily accept constructive criticism. You don't always embrace challenges, right? And you tend to plateau early. With growth mindset, you will embrace challenges. You will accept constructive criticism. You understand that failure is not necessarily the end goal. That it could be a step because you didn't learn something along the way, but you can still overcome whatever that failure is. So that's the difference there. Mastery orientation, which we are actually going to discuss in this lecture. The difference is really specific to learning goal orientation, and in contrast to performance goal orientation. So learning goal orientation, you believe that abilities are not fixed, that they can be developed over time, and that you understand that learning is important because learning is important because you learn for learning's sake, right? Performance goal orientation, by contrast, you believe abilities are fixed, they cannot be developed over time, and that you would rather just demonstrate and look smart in a situation without actually being smart. So you do just enough to pass or to be successful. So that's mastery orientation. Ethical dealings, are always link it to credit card and establishing and maintaining credit. And I tend to connect it to not just initially, but when you have a downturn in your life, especially economically and financially, that we always make the assumption that, well, if I'm down, I mean, the credit card companies are just going to get whatever I can get them, and so they're just going to have to understand. No, they don't. They don't have to understand anything. you owe the money back, right? And so we don't plan enough for the downtimes, for the downturns. You know, I went through a job loss during the financial recession. So that left me homeless. I had to live with parents. I lived with my parents. I had different types of issues. I had to live in shelters, etc. And so I didn't really have a lot of credit at that time because I really wasn't into credit. But then I did have some cards that I just couldn't pay. I just didn't have the money to pay them. And I was somewhat bothered by it. But then we hit this pandemic, and I was going good with my new credit cards that I had established. And that was like a 13-year change because I hadn't had any credit cards during the time I was going through homelessness and everything. But then I decided to get credit cards to build credit. And I was going good with paying my credit cards, being on time. I had an exceptional payment history. And then the pandemic hit, lost hours on my job, couldn't pay. And for the first time in my life, I was bothered and crying over the fact that I couldn't pay my credit card. And it left me sleepless and anxiety ridden. It bothered me. And I think that's a very important thing to say, because if you're trying to make change in your life, in any area of your life, you need to grieve over what you didn't do right. Because if you're not grieving over, if it doesn't bother you, if you're not turned around by it, then it is likely you're going to commit that same wrongdoing again. But this time it bothered me so much, whereas it didn't really bother me so much in the past. And so that I just decided, and I think I developed the core values and added ethical dealings just because I was so turned around and bothered emotionally from not being able to pay. Now, I am now able to pay. I still don't have a whole lot of hours, but I've caught everything up. I've brought the cards up to date, up to their balances, but it bothered me. It truly, truly bothered me. So ethical dealings, again, I say, it's more or less about the attitude that you have towards someone you owe. It can be a person, it can be an organization, credit card company, and that to deal ethically is to ensure that you have the job, have the money to pay, and that you've already set aside some sort of savings or plan or something to ensure that you can pay even in your downtime. Integrity always refers to character. The character that you have academically, professionally, personally, right? You just don't want to be a person who is favored politically but embarrassed financially. How many times have we heard some politicians go down for fraud? And it's always dealing with their finances. And so we forget that we need to handle our finances. We do very well, extremely well in our academics. We have high grades. We can graduate with honors, etc. Then we go into our careers and we're dominating our careers. We're moving up the career ladder. We're doing so well. But then on the finances and sometimes the romance side of things, which both fall on the personal, we're not doing so well. A person might have an affair, and then that personal issue spills over into the professional issue because somebody decided to go to the media. Or your financial issues, you didn't pay your taxes, or you have an organization and there's some sort of embezzlement or fraud or something like that. And so that personal issue now has spilled over into the professional, which then will turn around and affect the personal because you could go to jail. So integrity, when it comes to character, is really thinking through your decisions before you enter or engage in anything that you want to do. Do I have the integrity to finish this out, to sustain my contribution to it and finish it out strong and with integrity? That's something you have to know, because if you go into a job as an accountant and you don't know if you're going to be or exhibit any sort of integrity as an accountant, that may not be the job for you. or you just may need to check your integrity. So think about that in terms of character. And then recovery is always the end goal. It's not the only end goal. It's the end goal for this particular series that you definitely want to recover. So for me, when I wanted to recover from the time that I was going through homelessness and losing jobs or whatever, my goal was to get my job back. Now, I didn't say at the time that I needed to get my job back directly with teaching, but it ended up that way. And then I set a goal in April 2013 to become financially stable, and I achieved both of those goals. So that was recovery for me. Now I'm in the process of setting new financial goals as I move forward. So these are the core values. All right, so this is goal orientation, learning goal orientation versus performance goal orientation, and we are applying this concept to personal finances. All right, so let's look at learning goal orientation. A learning goal orientation is the belief that abilities are malleable and can be developed. Individuals pursue a mastery orientation of a subject and are willing to further develop. They reflect a growth mindset. LGO is frequently referred to as a mastery orientation or a willingness to work to develop. Individuals desire to learn for learning's sake. So if we were looking at this in terms of applying this concept here to personal finances, you understand that personal finances is a subject. It's a topic. That's why you have certified financial professionals, self-help gurus. You have all types of people who have developed their understanding about the subject of personal finances. So that means a lot of times they are tapping into what you don't understand and what you don't know about personal finances. And then you end up having to pay fees, etc. But understanding that you need to adopt a learning goal orientation towards this subject of personal finances is something that you need to consider, because if you are always using credit cards to sort of solve any personal crisis in your life, you are operating really from a fixed mindset. A fixed mindset that you are not willing to further develop your understanding about ensuring you have actual funds in the bank. And that suppose if you use your credit card for everything, suppose you couldn't use your credit card, or suppose your credit cards are maxed out. And that's another issue right there, that if you're always maxing out your credit cards and you don't have the money to pay, that's a part of the subject that you just don't understand. That many personal financial professionals always tell you to have the money to pay the full debt at the end of the month, because then you're going to incur a lot of fees, you're going to incur a lot of charges, and that's just going to exacerbate the situation. And so when you are thinking about using credit cards, what's your purpose for using credit cards? And I do invite you to visit Dave Ramsey's website, because I tend to watch a lot of his videos and visit his website when it comes to credit cards. I look at behavior. He looks more or less at just everyday application. And what do you really want to know about credit cards? You understand, I think we all have a good universal understanding about using credit cards to establish and build credit, right? That's just sort of like a go-to statement, but it hasn't been anything that has been clear enough for us to really understand why. We understand now the importance of it because it is connected to the credit score, and that the credit score is now determining whether or not you can get loans, or even if you can get a good apartment. And sometimes in certain professions, it is required if you want to get a job, especially the financial professions. You cannot have excessive debt working in the financial professions. because that speaks to your integrity, that speaks to your ethical dealings, that speaks to your character. And here it is, you want the job to hire you to manage their money. I know insurance companies won't hire you if you have too much debt on your books. And so if you still are a person if you're still a person struggling with credit card debt, way into your 40s, you're missing some instruction. For one, you should only get what you can manage, because if the goal is to build credit and sustain credit and raise your credit score, maybe 2 or 3 are enough to accomplish that goal. So that speaks to the need for us to set credit card and debt goals. And then if you are having a lot of debt issues, then you would have to set a debt reduction goal. And then if you are setting a debt reduction goal, you're looking at your current income and other responsibilities, especially financial responsibilities. That's why I always say to people, just because you get a raise at the job or you get this big bonus, that's really not the time to go and buy a new car or buy a higher level house. Really, if you can stand to stay in your current house for another 2 years and then plan your exit out of that house into the next house, that would actually be better, because you can get a bonus and turn around and lose your job right in the next month because of current economic crisis, especially depending upon the industry. Anytime the stock market is affected or something like that, and you work in a certain profession, you're going to be affected yourself. So you want to think about growth mindset, that your managing finances is a lifelong goal. That is something that I never really thought about, but I get the image of a person homeless, and many images of people homeless, and that is one of the goals that they did not manage that led them into homelessness. And a lot of times what happens is, people who become homeless, like I have become homeless, are the type of people who are covering everybody else but themselves. They're making sure everybody else have what they need, but they don't sit down as a 100% individual to make sure that they have what they need. You got to make sure that you have sound shelter. You may not always like the apartment that you are in, and you may end up having to move. That's fine. But you have the ability, the financial capacity to pay for sound shelter. So that means you don't want certain bills to outweigh the cost of shelter. You don't always need a fancy car, not where you are in the moment. Even if you make $100,000, you don't always need something that's going to burst your financial budget. Living simply, sometimes thriftily, is just as important, because you got to live longer than that moment. You got to live longer than your current your birth date. You got to live longer than your time on the job. I have listened to multiple audio discussions with Dave Ramsey, and I think I mentioned this in another audio lecture, that you have 70-year-olds who are having to return to work. That breaks my heart. That makes me cry when I think about, you are 70-something years old, and we're not talking about people who may need to work a couple of hours just for some little spending money, a few hours a day, maybe 3 or 4 days out of the week, and they just want a few spending money, or just to kind of make up what they're already getting in Social Security. We're talking about people who are standing on their feet 8 hours a day, or at least 5 to 6 every day, because they don't have a retirement. They didn't plan in their 20s. They didn't plan in their 30s. They didn't plan in their 40s. And that breaks my heart. When I see homeless people, it's like some homeless people have just completely given up. And it's like they don't exactly know where to go, or what step to take, or what to do. And that's why if we can begin thinking about adopting a growth mindset when it comes to the subject of personal finances, we won't find ourselves in a ditch later in life. That we need to learn about finances and personal finances and debt reduction and bankruptcies. We shouldn't have to go through a bankruptcy. If we do what we're supposed to do when we're supposed to do it in the season we're supposed to do it, then we wouldn't have to take on the strategy of a bankruptcy. And then that affects your whole credit. That affects how you are perceived, because in some applications that you apply to, you have to answer that question. Then it looks like a record. Like a criminal record. It looks like a record on your books, okay, that you were evicted from a home or apartment. You were foreclosed on. You had to file for bankruptcy. You lost your job multiple times, things like that. That doesn't look good. So adopting a learning goal orientation will help you to grow your growth mindset and keep you on a learning path. Don't just get out of the debt and say, "Oh, I've won, I'm done." No, you are continuously learning to the day you die. How many times have you heard people who were major contributors to um, the American landscape, so to speak, and died broke? I don't think that's a good legacy. No, you can't take your money where you are going, but I think you can leave a legacy behind in a trust and maybe pay out some scholarships for people, or give money to the homeless organizations, something like that, small business grants, etc. And then encourage learning for learning's sake through your legacy. And that's what I hope to accomplish myself. Performance goal orientation. To adopt a performance goal orientation is to believe that ability is fixed and cannot change. Individuals pursue a performance orientation. They reflect a fixed mindset. People with a strong PGO tend to see failure as weakness and stress the importance of short-term performance results. They desire to demonstrate knowledge and look smart. Now, you do have some people, I'm going to give you an exception to the rule. You do have some people who do very well when they're training for a standardized test, and they are concerned about the numbers, and they want to look smart in a situation. But you don't necessarily have to study for that test, you have to train for that test. And so then you get the short-term performance results, which is a high SAT score, high GRE score, something like that. And you train for a long length of time in order to achieve that short-term performance result, because you're not going to take studying SAT into the classroom. That's a different type of learning strategy. We're talking about performance goal orientation. We're talking about people who learn just enough to learn just enough. They're not interested in learning anything for learning's sake, and they essentially want to look smart. Well, you got people who are now entering, say, different industries, Hollywood industries, music industries, and they want to make it big. And they're not going to go to school and develop in their craft or anything like that. They're not going to receive mentoring. They're not going to take the time to develop themselves through different projects. They just want to make it big. They just want to immediately get the big shot and be before people. And they may have this one hit song, and it's a dance song, and everybody loves it. It's universal. But then when the publishing companies, sponsoring companies are looking for the next deal or the next big hit, they don't have any options. They don't know what to do because they didn't develop. They didn't allow for the time to develop in their craft, in their skill. Especially if those artists are having people to write their music, and the artist himself or herself is not writing the music. You're not building skill. So they want to look smart. They get on stage and they hop up and down and they sing and they rap, and all their crew is on the stage, but they're only demonstrating knowledge and looking smart. That is temporary. It's temporary knowledge. It's temporary understanding. It's short bursts of knowledge. Go back into the recording studio and continue to record. They can't do that. Sometimes these organizations will bring an outside person in and have that person write the music. So that means they had a fixed mindset. They were not willing to learn anything beyond that. I heard Spike Lee once say in an interview, as he teaches for college as well as continues to produce, that students were asking him about what should they do to break into the business. And the first thing he asked was, do you have a script? And some students were saying no, and some students said they only had one. And then and then some students just say, yes, I have one. And then he further asked, do you have a portfolio, or are you writing, continuously? And they were shocked by that question. Why would I wait? Why would I write all those scripts? Don't I need to get the job first to write the scripts? No, you prepare when no one knows your name. That's the best time to prepare. Companies, book publishing companies, always ask the person, the writer, the author, what's your next project, right? Because usually publishers publish in trilogies, because they want to then be able to create a trilogy in a film, because your one topic manifested into a book needs to be able to be distributed in different forms, so that it could have 3 is part of a trilogy, or it could expand even more. Then it could be turned into a movie. Then it could be turned into maybe a cable series, possibly a Lifetime movie or something like that. Then it could be turned into maybe a conference or something. They're looking to continually be able to pull revenues from that one original topic idea. But if you come into an industry saying that all I need is the one, that's a fixed mindset. You're trying to look smart. You're trying to look like something before your time, but you haven't developed yourself. So you are performing. You think to yourself, this is all I need, but that's not how it all goes. And so you want to make sure that you are not demonstrating knowledge and looking smart, the type of knowledge that's temporary. Instead, you want to make sure that there's a range to you. It's very competitive today. A lot of people have a radio podcast. A lot of people have a YouTube channel. People have websites. They have other little things that are media driven. They can upload to different types of media sharing sites. And then you have on top of that social media, etc. And so you can't go into this new wave of really learning, honestly, new wave of learning, but definitely new wave of doing business and branding yourself with a fixed mindset. There's a time that you have to prepare and plan, and then there's a time that you're going to have to then be able to apply understanding. So that means you're going to have to read. You're going to have to learn new things. So to adopt a performance goal orientation is to believe that ability is fixed and cannot change. So these are the people who think that I'm an A student. All they understand is that I got A's on my test. But if you ask them a question about what they learned, they wouldn't be able to tell you. In some cases, very few cases, you will have someone who can tell you what they learned. But then there are some cases where people truly don't understand. They really don't know. They couldn't explain to you what they learned. And that's something that you want to think about, because this is what I tell my students a lot of times, that the best way to learn your field is to teach it. Now, you don't necessarily have to become a teacher, but if you are tutoring somebody, that puts you in a position to have to explain the concept. And you will know if you fully understand the concept, if you are speaking from a very smooth communication strategy, or if you are stumbling and trying to find your thoughts about it. If you find yourself stumbling, that means you don't have a command of the concept or the meanings or any understanding of the ideas, right? So that means you have to go back somewhere and practice and, talk about it a little bit more with yourself, and then also then go and try to teach it to somebody else. And sometimes if you don't have an individual to talk to, you could always turn on your video tool on your computer and then just throw a question to your own self and then try to answer it. And you'll know for certain if you have a good command of the material. So a lot of times students I know don't really care too much about learning English. I teach English. Or some students don't care too much about learning math or history. Any of your core courses, English, science, history, and math. So they're not going to be concerned with a learning goal orientation. They just want to do whatever they have to do to pass. So they would adopt a performance goal orientation. But I also tell my students that you should be pulling A's in your major. That means you would have to adopt a learning goal orientation. If you're pulling B's and C's, you're still getting by. And in your major, this is something that you want to do and you say you have a passion for and you think you're the best fit for it, then you shouldn't have a fixed mindset about your major. You shouldn't desire to demonstrate knowledge and look smart with your major, right? You should be able to look at any failure you have and address it, receive constructive criticism and mentoring, and then move forward. But if you are just concerned about getting a passing grade in your major, that tells you that you have a fixed mindset. So when you're thinking about performance goal orientation, think about your ability, your capacity, your learning ability, your learning capacity, and do understand you can't learn everything in the world. I'm not saying that you need to adopt a learning goal orientation for everything in the world, but you definitely want to adopt a learning goal orientation for the thing you really want to do, so that everything else is essentially a performance goal orientation. You do what you need to do to pass, right? Just make sure that you understand that that's a habit that you don't want to apply to other areas of your life. Personal finances, you are going to have, there are some areas in your life where you're going to have a performance goal orientation. You may not be interested in learning anything. So sometimes I notice that I would rather the money for pension or retirement just come out of my check. I don't really want to do the hard work of taking the money myself out of the bank account and then taking it to the investment person, because I may not do it. So we all know that we have the option of just having a percentage of money going out of our check to our retirement plan or something like that. I'd rather that happen. So that may reflect in me a fixed mindset, because I'm not willing to do the work other than just to have that go out. But the totality of it is maybe a growth mindset, because I'm still willing to think about the future of me in my present. And so that I'm still interested in managing personal finances, even if I'm not directly taking the money out of my paycheck and putting it with the investment bank, right? So do keep performance goal orientation in mind. Now that we have explored the definitions for learning goal orientation and performance goal orientation, let's look at some sample survey items that a psychology researcher or scholar or even a professor might use to gauge whether the survey participants exhibit a learning goal orientation or performance goal orientation based upon a research hypothesis and research question. So let's look at the first survey item. I want to learn as much as possible. The next one, I like best when something I learn makes me want to find out more. When I fail to complete a difficult task, I plan to try harder the next time I work on it. I prefer to work on tasks that force me to learn new things. So if we were looking at this from the personal finances strategy, a lot of times we are not really interested in learning, especially when we get a credit card. The most we care about is the credit limit. We care about the annual percentage rate, sometimes anyway. We care about any late fees. What are those late fees? And then if there is an annual fee that we have to pay on the card. But we don't really look too much more into the disclosure statements, the state-based type statements, all of the information that comes with that card when you receive it in the mail. So we're not really interested in learning as much as possible about credit card. Even before we select credit cards, we don't do a comparison. Sometimes the internet sources, third-party sources will provide a comparison tool and show you, different cards, but we don't know really how to read that information because we're so busy looking at the credit limit that we don't really look at just how much of an impact having that card would be on us, especially if the annual percentage rate is very high, and if we have to put any money down for a secured card. So we're not really interested in learning as much as possible. I know when it comes to having money taken out of my paycheck to go towards retirement, I'm really not too concerned about learning as much as possible because all I understand is that it's going to come out of my paycheck. A certain amount, each paycheck is going to come out of my paycheck. But I haven't really researched retirement plans. The information that comes with the plan, I never read it. And so when I think about that, it's something that I want to consider and think about going forward so that I am much more well informed. I like best when something I learn makes me want to find out more. Again, that's not always the case, but learning goal orientation suggests that you are the type of person you want to find out more. Now, there are certain areas in our lives where we really want to find out more about something, but it's not always personal finances. Usually people who are going to major in one or more of the financial professions are the ones who really want to learn more, especially if it's a person who's going to become an investment banker, a financial professional like an accountant, or become a personal finance specialist or something like that, because they have to learn. And even if the have to might suggest a fixed mindset because you may not want to learn it, you still learn it because you don't want to look stupid, right? When I fail to complete a difficult task, I plan to try harder the next time I work on it. So that speaks to task management. So if you're struggling with a particular goal to pay off 3 of your credit cards, sending a certain percentage of your income to those credit cards for the next 6 months, and you're doing so, you're choosing those 3 credit cards because the balances are low. And if something happens and you lose hours on your job and you can't really keep to that goal, that's not necessarily a failure. You might have failed to achieve that third month to pay 3 of those cards, but that's not technically a failure. That would be just struggling, right? The failure would be if you decided not to continue that goal. That here it is, you're going good, but then you get stumped by the fact that you are losing hours and it's messing with your goal of paying off those 3 credit cards. And it just seems like everything's just going haywire and you just don't want to continue doing it anymore. And so if you stop in the middle of your goal and you stop before you can reach goal completion, then that will be considered a failure. And that means you are having trouble with task management. I prefer to work on tasks that force me to learn new things. So it's helpful when you decide that you want to enter the investment market, that even if you started with just mutual funds, CDs or something like that, that gives you a new task to work on and learn new things. The thing is, though, you can't get too lazy in your personal finances when it comes to your income as well, because we will have the eagerness to learn new things but forget to manage what we already know. And so learning goal orientation is that process where you are managing what you already know and allowing for new things. And then anytime you struggle with anything you already know, you address it, you self-reflect, you resolve it, and you continue on sustaining what you know while you continue to add the new things that you are interested in. So let's look at performance goal orientation. I want others to think I'm smart. I am motivated by the thought of outperforming my peers. I strive to demonstrate my ability relative to others. The opinions of others about how well I do certain things are important to me. And when I think about this, I want others to think I'm smart, and I'm motivated by the thought of outperforming my peers. I think about when people win the lottery. And there's this implicit idea that if you have won the lottery, you must be really smart. Because, it has its own process. You choose what type of lottery product you're going to purchase. Then you go back home and you think about the numbers, and you go back to the store and you turn it in, and then you look at the TV for the numbers, or you find out however way you're going to find out that information. And then you do that consistently, especially if you haven't won. And then one day you hit. And so then people think to themselves, oh, he was kind of like a hard worker. He stayed with that thing. He did a good job, and now he's a winner. The problem is, though, you hear a lot of people who have won the lottery and they end up losing their money within a year, or at least within 2 years, because missing that lottery win is the accompanying of knowledge, of understanding how to manage your money, how to adopt a task management plan for managing that type of money. That means that you need to go and talk to an attorney about setting up a trust. You need to set up a will, a durable power of attorney, healthcare directives, things like that. Because what people do is they go get the money and they win the lottery, and they think that is a reflection of hard work, and that they don't necessarily need to manage because they have all that money. And then they begin outperforming their peers in the sense that they want to look like they are rich because technically they are. And so then that means you go get a new car, you go get a new house, you go get a new this, or you go new watch, jewelry, things like that, so that it looks like you're rich. And people oftentimes will push you into that because they want to know to what extent the kind of money you really have. And so they'll push you, man, you really do need to move out of this neighborhood and go get you one of those big houses with the gate. Because then if you can afford a $500,000 house, they know you have at least more than $500,000. So your motivations change, but you still haven't learned anything. Because how are you going to sustain $1 million? And then especially if you decide to quit your job, how will you sustain that? That means you need to keep that for the rest of your life. I strive to demonstrate my ability relative to others. The opinions of others about how well I do certain things are important to me. And so then you care more about the opinions of others than you care about yourself. I always suggest, when it comes to winning the lottery, and I don't play the lottery, but if you win any type of thing, I wouldn't tell anybody. And I would go to, pick up the winnings with a mask on, but I would immediately move out of the state. And I would just arrange with a moving company or something like that to move. I will pay somebody, but I wouldn't do that, because I wouldn't live in the same state or city or area, because I would need to get off to myself into a motel, think about things, pray about things, make sure I have a good understanding of things before I make the decision, any type of monetary decision. That's especially if I want to be able to keep it. So again, these sample survey items are typically specific to academic context, but I think they are useful enough for us to apply to the personal finance context, especially when you think about outperforming your peers. So you don't have a whole lot of money, but somehow you are wearing name brand clothes, name brand shoes, name brand jewelry items, but you don't have anything in the bank other than your paycheck that you just got, that's going to now go towards paying your shelter costs and your car note or something like that, but you have no savings, you have no retirement plan, you have no investment product of some sort, right? You have no 6-month emergency that you could depend upon if something happens to you, but you are very concerned with outperforming your peers. So you see a peer with some new Gucci shoes or Chanel bag or something like that, and you feel like you have to go get that to keep up with that person. But that doesn't work for your budget. And that's why you need to take some time to sit down with your budget, because remember, you are 100% responsible for you. And you don't want to have all those items, those very expensive items, and then you have to go and move in with someone because you lost your place. So that's why we have to always check our beliefs about what people think of us, the opinions of others, our motivations, trying to look smart. You got a lot of people who will not learn anything and would just learn just enough and look smart. That's not going to work long term, because eventually you're going to hit a brick wall. Someone's going to ask you a question about your personal finances, or someone's going to ask you a question about what you know and don't know, and you're going to have to be able to answer it. So think about these sample survey items for learning goal orientation and performance goal orientation, and think about it and apply it to your understanding of your own personal finances and how well you manage the tasks that you are confronted with when it comes to your personal finances. Overcoming financial setback, what should you do? Determine if adopting a learning goal orientation is necessary for navigating your personal finances. Adopt a learning goal orientation for understanding credit, debt, budgeting, investments, emergency savings, and general personal finance. Because even if you take from this particular this discussion that adopting a learning goal orientation is not necessary for me, I'm just going to take it day by day. Well, usually I always remember the people who take things day by day always end up being the people who have to go live with someone because they didn't plan ahead. And that's something that I wish I had really had a good understanding in my 20s, so that in my 40s I wouldn't have to struggle. And then in my middle to late 30s is when I lost my job and I was homeless and I had issues or whatever. Well, if I had really planned well in my 20s, then I would have had something saved up for my late 30s when things shifted and turned around. And then I would have been able to not necessarily coast in my 40s, but be really stable enough so that I could make, different plans going forward. I definitely don't want to have problems in my 50s, and I don't want to have to be a person who has to work in my 70s. So these are some things I'm thinking about now in my 40s, and I'm 46 in 2021. These are some things I'm thinking about in my 40s, so that going forward, when I reach my 60s and my 70s and my 80s, and preferably in my 90s, that I'm not a burden to someone financially. So when you're looking at the different tasks that you have to consider, you're looking at it from credit, as managing your tasks when it comes to credit, managing your tasks when it comes to debt, managing your tasks when it comes to budgeting, managing your tasks when it comes to investments, managing your tasks when it comes to emergency savings, and managing your tasks when it comes to general personal finance. That's why I use task management, the concept, to apply to each entity, because each entity, although they all come together and are correlated under one particular heading, umbrella, personal finance, they're each different in their own requirements, expectations, value, as well as application. So I think you should adopt a learning goal orientation when it comes to personal finances. Don't think that just because you have options with other areas of your life and that you don't have to don't necessarily have to learn other areas of your life as much as you do your main career. Don't assume that also applies to personal finance, because you got to live with you all day, every day, for the rest of your life until death. And that's something that I want you to think about. Really consider a learning goal orientation when it comes to personal finances. And these are not the only subtopics under personal finance, but they are the major subtopics under personal finance. All right, hopefully you were able to gain some insight from this series topic. Like, subscribe, and visit. Like the video, hit the notification bell for future videos. You can visit my website, which is still in development, reginayfavors.com. You can always email me with a question, reginayfavors@yahoo.com. You will be able to purchase the book by the end of October 2021. I'm hoping that I will have it completed, completely revised rather. It is already written and done. I just have to edit it. It is Overcoming Setback: 5 Keys for Entering and Exiting Correction. Thank you for visiting the channel. Coming soon is my new book that I am working on presently and hope to complete by the end of the year, December 2021, preferably February 2022, and that is Favors: Financial Recovery, Psychological Approaches to Overcoming Financial Setback, with some workbook elements. So it is it will be the book that will support the audio series, although I have developed the audio series prior to actually writing the book. So be on the lookout for this new book. When it comes out, when I finish, I will create an audio introduction to the book. Thank you again for visiting the channel.